Clara Dalton stepped off that stagecoach into what felt like the end of the world. 3 weeks of bone-rattling travel, 2,000 miles from Boston, and every last penny to her name, all for a man who had already replaced her. The clerk's words still echoed in her ears like a death knell. Mr. Porter has taken another wife. Before we dive into Clara's incredible journey from complete devastation to unexpected happiness, I want to invite you to stay with me until the very end of this story. You will not regret it. And please drop a comment telling me what city or country you are watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel and connecting with all of you around the world. Now let us begin. The Texas sun beat down on redemption like a hammer on an anvil, merciless and unforgiving. It was late afternoon in June of 1873, and the heat made promises wilt before they could take root. The town itself shimmered in the glare, a collection of weathered buildings that leaned into each other like tired soldiers. This was the edge of civilization, where dreams came to either flourish or die, and there was precious little in between. Clara felt every one of those 2,000 miles in her bones as the stagecoach lurched to its final stop. Her traveling dress, once a respectable Boston blue, was now gray with trail dust. Her carefully pinned hair had long since surrendered to chaos, wisps sticking to her damp forehead and neck. But none of that had mattered. She had made it. She was finally here. Her hand trembled as she gathered her carpet bag and the small trunk that contained everything she owned. Her mother's lace tablecloth, 3 dresses, 2 pairs of shoes, her father's medical journals, and the carefully preserved letters from Benjamin Porter, letters that had been her beacon through the darkest months after her father's death. Dear Miss Dalton, the first letter had begun in careful, educated handwriting. Your response to my advertisement has given me hope that perhaps Providence has not forgotten this humble man. She had read that letter 100 times until the paper grew soft with handling. Benjamin Porter had seemed like an answer to prayers she had been too proud to speak aloud. A merchant, he had written, established and respectable, 42 years old and never married because he had been too focused on building something worthy of offering to a wife. He had sent money for her passage, $50 that had seemed like a fortune. He had made arrangements for her to stay at Mrs. Grayson's boarding house until the wedding. He had even included a schedule: arrival on June 15th, wedding on June 17th. Everything had been planned, organized, civilized. Clara had allowed herself to believe in it. She had imagined a home of her own, a partnership with a man who valued character over beauty, intelligence over youth. At 22, she knew she was not a prize on the marriage market. Too old to be a debutante, too educated to be entirely comfortable in polite society. Benjamin Porter had seemed like her salvation. The stagecoach driver, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained whiskers, helped her down. Here you are, miss. Redemption, Texas. End of the line. Thank you, Clara managed, her voice hoarse from 3 days of breathing dust. You got folks meeting you? His eyes held concern for this young woman traveling alone. Yes, Mr. Benjamin Porter. He owns the dry goods store. Something flickered across the driver's weathered face. Surprise, perhaps, or was it pity? But before Clara could interpret it, he had already turned away, hauling her trunk down with a grunt. Clara scanned the small crowd at the depot, looking for the man from the photograph Benjamin had sent. A formal portrait, stiff and serious, showing a man with dark hair, a strong jaw, and eyes that had not quite smiled at the camera. She had studied that photograph until she could have drawn it from memory, but she did not see him. Her heart began to beat faster. Perhaps he was delayed. Perhaps he had gone to the wrong depot. Perhaps. Miss Dalton? A thin young man in a clerk's vest and wire-rimmed spectacles approached her, his expression anxious. You would be Miss Clara Dalton from Boston? Relief flooded through her even as a small voice whispered that something was wrong. This was not Benjamin Porter. Yes, I am Miss Dalton. Are you here on behalf of Mr. Porter? The clerk's face went pale. He removed his spectacles and cleaned them on his vest, a nervous gesture that made Clara's stomach clench. Miss Dalton, I think perhaps we should speak inside the office. I would prefer to speak here, thank you. Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. Years of navigating Boston society had taught her how to stand firm when everything inside wanted to break. Where is Mr. Porter? the clerk looking like he wanted the earth to swallow him. Miss Dalton, there has been a situation, a complication. Mr. Porter asked me to meet you and to explain. Explain what? The words that came next would haunt Clara for weeks. Mr. Porter was married this morning to Miss Sarah Whitmore. Miss Whitmore's father owns the bank. And when her previous engagement fell through 3 weeks ago, Mr. Porter and her father reached an agreement. The world tilted. Clara heard the words, understood their meaning, but could not quite believe they were real. Married this morning, 3 weeks ago. While she had been on a stagecoach rattling across the country, spending every penny she had, believing in those careful letters in that formal photograph, he had been courting someone else. Someone richer, someone more connected, someone already here. I see, she heard herself say, her voice distant. And when was Mr. Porter planning to inform me of this arrangement? He sent a telegram 2 weeks ago to the last forwarding address you provided in Springfield. Perhaps it did not reach you in time. Or perhaps I never received any telegram. Clara's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her skirt, willing them to be still. I have been traveling for 3 weeks, Mr. Hawkins, Thomas Hawkins. I am Mr. Porter's clerk. He looked miserable. I am so very sorry, Miss Dalton. This is a terrible situation. Yes, Clara agreed, the single word coming out brittle. It is. Around them, the depot had gone quiet. Clara was dimly aware of people watching, of the drama unfolding for their entertainment. A woman with 2 small children stared openly. A cowboy who had been leaning against a post had straightened, his attention now fixed on Clara and the unfortunate Mr. Hawkins. Mr. Porter has authorized me to arrange your return passage, Hawkins continued, pulling a small envelope from his vest pocket. The stagecoach leaves day after tomorrow. He has provided funds for your ticket and your lodging until then, and he has added an additional $20 for your inconvenience. $20 for her inconvenience. Clara stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. $20, as if that could compensate for the $52 she had already spent. The bridges she had burned in Boston, the humiliation of standing here in this godforsaken town, jilted before she had even had a chance to become a bride. I spent $52 to get here, she heard herself say. I have $3 left to my name, and you are offering me $20 and a ticket back to nothing. Hawkins flinched. Mr. Porter felt that. Mr. Porter is a coward who could not even face me himself. The words burst out before she could stop them, loud enough to carry across the depot. Heat flooded her cheeks, but she could not seem to care. He sent for me, made promises, took my money, and then he married someone else without having the decency to ensure I knew before I traveled 2,000 miles into the desert. Miss Dalton, please. So he sent for her, then found someone richer. The new voice cut through the tension like a knife, deep and quiet and edged with steel. Clara turned to find the cowboy she had noticed earlier, now standing a few feet away. He was tall, broad-shouldered in the way of men who earn their living with their bodies rather than their minds. His clothes were work-worn, but clean. A hat shadowed his face, but she could see strong features, a jaw set with anger, and eyes the color of a Texas sky that studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Mr. Hale, Hawkins's voice carried a note of warning. This does not concern you. It does not it? The cowboy, Hale, did not look at Hawkins. His attention remained fixed on Clara. Seems to me it concerns anyone with a sense of decency. Porter sent for this woman, made promises, and then threw her over for better prospects. That is low, even for a businessman. And in that moment, standing in the dust of a Texas depot with her world crumbling around her, Clara Dalton made a decision that would change everything. The cowboy's words hung in the air like a challenge. Clara found herself staring at this stranger who had spoken up when he had no reason to, no obligation to care about her humiliation. Mr. Porter's private affairs, Hawkins began, but Hale cut him off. Stop on being private at the minute you humiliate someone in public. His voice did not rise, but it carried a weight that made Hawkins take a step back. You have delivered your message, Tom. I think you can go now. I have to make arrangements for Miss Dalton's return. No, Clara heard herself say, the word coming out stronger than she felt. No, you do not. Both men turned to look at her. She lifted her chin, meeting Hale's eyes directly. They were steady, those eyes, clear and honest in a way that made something in her chest loosen slightly. I am not taking Mr. Porter's charity, and I am not getting on a stagecoach day after tomorrow. Her voice grew stronger with each word. He may have broken his promises, but I am not so easily discarded. Miss Dalton, be reasonable, Hawkins pleaded. I am being reasonable. I am refusing to let Benjamin Porter ease his conscience with blood money while I crawl back to Boston in disgrace. She turned to Hawkins, and something in her expression made him take another step back. You tell Mr. Porter that I do not want his $20 or his ticket. You tell him that I hope his new wife makes him very happy. And you tell him that Clara Dalton is not his problem to solve. Hawkins opened his mouth, closed it, then seemed to think better of whatever he had been about to say. He gave a stiff nod, tucked the envelope back into his vest, and retreated toward the depot office with obvious relief, which left Clara alone with the cowboy and the ruins of her carefully constructed future. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Clara became acutely aware of how she must look. Dusty, disheveled, her eyes probably red-rimmed from the combination of dust and unshed tears. She wanted to say something cutting, something that would establish that she did not need his pity or anyone else's, but the words would not come. Is everything all right, ma'am? It was such a simple question, and it undid her. Everything was not all right. Nothing was all right. She was stranded in Texas with $3 and no prospects, and she had just dramatically refused the only lifeline she had been offered because her pride apparently outweighed her common sense. No, she said, and was horrified when her voice cracked. No, everything is decidedly not all right. Hale nodded as if she had said something profound. Figured as much. You got a place to stay? Clara's mind raced. Mrs. Grayson's boarding house. Mr. Porter made arrangements there, but I do not know if he also canceled them when he decided to marry Sarah Whitmore. Come on. Hale picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing and started walking. Wait, where are you? Clara grabbed her carpet bag and hurried after him, her exhaustion forgotten in her confusion. Sir, I cannot just... Name's Wyatt Hale. He glanced back at her, and for the first time she saw a hint of a smile. I run the Broken Arrow Ranch about an hour's ride north of town. I am not planning to kidnap you, Miss Dalton, just taking you to Mrs. Grayson's. Figure you need a place to sit down and think. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to maintain some semblance of independence, but the truth was she had no idea where Mrs. Grayson's boarding house was, and the thought of wandering through this strange town asking for directions while everyone whispered about the jilted mail-order bride made her want to cry. Thank you, she managed instead. I appreciate your assistance. They walked in silence through Redemption's dusty streets. The town was larger than Clara had expected, but still unmistakably frontier. False-fronted buildings lined the main street. Wooden sidewalks echoed under her feet. They passed a bank, and Clara wondered if Benjamin Porter and his new bride were inside right now, perhaps discussing their financial future while she trudged past with all her worldly possessions carried by a stranger. The saloon's doors swung open as they approached, releasing a wave of noise and the smell of whiskey. Several men stumbled out, their attention immediately fixing on Clara with a directness that made her skin crawl. Well now, what do we have here? One of them called, a burly man with a beard that looked like it housed small animals. Fresh meat off the stage. Wyatt did not break stride. He simply shifted his position slightly, moving between Clara and the men, and something in his posture, the set of his shoulders, the way his hand rested near his hip, made the drunk men suddenly very interested in going somewhere else. Mrs. Grayson's boarding house sat at the end of a residential street that boasted actual trees, struggling cottonwoods that provided small circles of shade. The house itself was a two-story frame building painted a cheerful yellow with a porch that wrapped around the front and side. Flower boxes hung in the windows, though their contents had largely surrendered to the Texas heat. It looked normal. That was what struck Clara most forcefully. It looked like a place where normal lives happened. Wyatt set down her trunk on the porch and knocked. A moment later, the door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes traveled from Wyatt to Clara and back again, and understanding flickered across her weathered face. "Mr. Hale," her voice was crisp, efficient. "I take it this is Miss Dalton." "Yes, ma'am, I'm guessing you heard." "The whole town has heard by now." Mrs. Grayson's expression softened as she looked at Clara. "Come in, child. You look ready to drop." "Mr. Porter made arrangements for me to stay here," Clara said, then stopped. "At least I believe he did. Before he, that is, I am not sure if he held the room for you, and he will be paying for it whether he likes it or not." Mrs. Grayson's tone brooked no argument. "I do not hold with how he handled this situation, and I told him so this morning before his wedding. Now come inside before you faint in my doorway." Clara wanted to protest that she was not going to faint, but the truth was the world had started to feel distinctly unstable around the edges. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation at the depot was draining away, leaving only bone-deep exhaustion in the beginning of what promised to be a truly spectacular headache. Wyatt caught her elbow as she swayed. "Easy there." "I am fine," Clara said automatically, but she did not pull away. "Stubborn," Wyatt observed. "That will serve you well out here." Mrs. Grayson held the door wide. "Mr. Hale, if you would bring her trunk inside, the room is upstairs, second on the left." Clara followed them inside, her impressions reduced to snapshots. Clean floors, simple furniture, the smell of soap and cooking meat, stairs that seemed impossibly tall, a landing with photographs on the walls, a door that opened to reveal a small room with an iron-frame bed, a washstand, a chest of drawers, and a window that looked out onto the street. It was more than she had dared hope for. It was clean and private and safe. "I will bring up some water for washing," Mrs. Grayson said, "and I will have supper ready in an hour if you are up to eating." "I do not," Clara's voice failed him. "I cannot pay you right now. I have $3, but—" "We will settle accounts later," Mrs. Grayson's tone was firm. "Right now, you need to rest." Wyatt set down her trunk and turned to leave, but Clara found herself speaking before she had fully formed the thought. "Mr. Hale," he paused in the doorway, his hat in his hands. "Why did you help me?" The question came out smaller than she had intended. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." For a long moment, he was quiet. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but certain. "Because Porter was wrong, and because you looked like you needed someone to stand with you. Sometimes that is enough." He settled his hat back on his head and started for the door. "Mr. Hale?" Clara called again. He looked back. "Thank you." He nodded once, then he was gone, his boots echoing on the stairs. Clara heard him exchange a few quiet words with Mrs. Grayson, heard the front door open and close, then silence. She stood in the middle of the small room, surrounded by her few possessions, and the reality of her situation crashed over her like a wave. She was alone in Texas. She had no money, no prospects, and no way home. The man who had promised her a future had discarded her without a second thought. Everything she had gambled on, everything she had hoped for was gone. Clara did not cry. She had not cried when her father died, had not cried through the months of her aunt's cold charity, had not cried during 3 weeks of brutal travel. She would not start now. But her hands were shaking and her breath was coming in short gasps, and she could feel herself unraveling. A soft knock on the door pulled her back from the edge. "Miss Dalton, I have brought water and towels. May I come in?" Clara stood, smoothed her skirt, and wiped at her eyes. "Of course." Mrs. Grayson entered with a pitcher of water and an armful of clean towels. She set them on the washstand, then turned to look at Clara with an expression that held both sympathy and something harder. Respect, perhaps. "It is not the end of the world," the older woman said, "though I imagine it feels that way right now." "I am not sure what it is," Clara admitted. "I thought I had a plan. I thought I knew what I was doing." "Plans change. People disappoint us. That is life, especially out here." Mrs. Grayson moved to the window and adjusted the curtain. "But you are young, you are healthy, and if I am any judge, you have got a backbone made of steel under all that Eastern refinement. Those are assets. They do not pay for room and board. No, but they will carry you through what comes next." Mrs. Grayson turned back to face her. Redemption is not Boston, Miss Dalton. We do not have much use for pedigree or finishing school manners, but we value grit. And from what I saw down at the depot, you have got plenty of that. Clara almost smiled. Word travels fast. Like wildfire. By nightfall, everyone will know you told Porter to keep his money and his guilt. Mrs. Grayson's eyes held a glint of approval. That took courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they are the same thing. She moved toward the door, then paused. Get cleaned up and rest. Come down for supper if you feel up to it. Tomorrow we will figure out what comes next. There are options, even if you cannot see them yet. After she left, Clara sat on the edge of the bed and looked around at her new room and her new reality. She began to unpack her meager belongings, each item finding a place. Her dresses went into the chest of drawers, her father's medical journals on the small table beside the bed, her mother's lace tablecloth folded carefully on top of the dresser. She changed out of the wedding dress and put on a simple cotton dress, then washed her face and hands. The water turned gray, but she felt incrementally more human with each cool splash. From her trunk, she pulled out the small purse she had hidden in the lining. Inside were not $3, but 37. She had forgotten about the coins she had sewn into the hem of her underskirt for safety during travel. $37 between her and destitution. Not much, but something. That evening, Clara made herself go downstairs for supper. The dining room held 3 tables, 2 of them occupied. At one sat a family, at the other sat 2 women, one young and pretty with blonde curls, the other older and dressed in the severe style of a schoolteacher. All conversation stopped when Clara entered. Miss Dalton, Mrs. Grayson appeared from the kitchen. I am glad you came down. Take a seat anywhere. I will bring your plate. Clara chose a small table by the window, acutely aware of the eyes following her. The meal was simple but hearty, roast beef with potatoes and carrots. Clara discovered she was ravenous despite her emotional turmoil. Around her, conversation resumed in hushed tones. Heard she traveled all the way from Boston. Terrible thing for Porter to do, even if Whitmore's daughter is a better match. Wonder what she will do now. Cannot stay here forever. Clara kept her eyes on her plate and tried to pretend she could not hear them. Excuse me. The younger of the 2 women had approached Clara's table. Up close, she was even prettier, with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to introduce myself. I am Emma Hartley. I teach at the schoolhouse. Clara looked up, surprised. Oh, hello. I just wanted to say that what happened to you was terribly unfair, and if there is anything I can do to help, please let me know. We women need to stand together, especially out here. Something in Clara's chest loosened slightly. That is very kind of you, Miss Hartley. Emma, please, and if you need work, I might know of some opportunities. Nothing grand, but enough to get by. We could talk tomorrow if you would like. I would like that very much. Emma smiled and returned to her table. The older woman gave Clara an approving nod before turning back to her meal. It was such a small gesture of kindness, but it made the dining room feel fractionally less hostile. Clara had just finished eating when the front door opened and Wyatt Hale stepped inside. He had cleaned up since the afternoon. Fresh shirt, damp hair combed back, dust brushed from his clothes. His eyes found Clara immediately, and he crossed the room to her table with a purposeful stride. Miss Dalton, he held his hat in his hands. Do you have a moment? Every eye in the dining room fixed on them. Clara felt heat creep up her neck, but kept her voice steady. Of course, Mr. Hale. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat without waiting for permission. Mrs. Grayson appeared with a knowing smile, setting down a cup of coffee in front of him without being asked. I wanted to check on you, Wyatt said once Mrs. Grayson had retreated. Make sure you are settled. I am as settled as I can be given the circumstances. Clara folded her hands in her lap. Thank you again for your help this afternoon. It was nothing. It was not nothing to me. He studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. What are you going to do? I do not know yet, she admitted. Miss Hartley mentioned there might be work. I will need to explore my options. What kind of work did you do back east? Clara hesitated. I kept house for my father after my mother died. He was a physician. I helped him with his practice, keeping records, ordering supplies, sometimes assisting with patients. After he died, I lived with my aunt. I did not have a formal position. Can you read and write? Do figures? Yes, of course. Can you cook? Keep accounts? Run a household? Clara bristled slightly at the interrogation. I am not incompetent, Mr. Hale, if that is what you are suggesting. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. That is not what I am suggesting at all, Miss Dalton. He set down his coffee cup and leaned forward slightly, his expression turning serious. I am suggesting that perhaps you do not need to scramble for whatever scraps of work you can find in town. I am suggesting there might be another option. What kind of option? Wyatt took a breath as if gathering courage for what he was about to say. I run the Broken Arrow Ranch about an hour north of here. It is not much, just me and two ranch hands, about 500 acres, 100 head of cattle. It is honest work, but it is lonely work. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I have been thinking for a while now that I could use help. Someone to manage the house, keep accounts, maybe help with the business side of things. Someone smart, someone capable. His eyes met hers directly. Someone like you. Clara's heart began to beat faster. You are offering me a co. I am offering you a choice, Wyatt said. And maybe if things work out, something more than a job. He let that hang in the air for a moment before continuing. I know this is fast. I know it probably seems crazy. But Clara, you came out here to marry a man you had never met because you believed in the possibility of partnership, of building something together. I am offering the same thing, just without the pretty letters and false promises. What exactly are you offering? Clara's voice came out barely above a whisper. Employment, if that is all you want? $30 a month, your own room, no expectations beyond honest work. You could leave any time with 2 weeks' notice, no hard feelings. He paused. Or marriage, a real partnership, equal say in decisions about the ranch, your name on the deed alongside mine. This place would be as much yours as mine, legally and in every other way. The words hung between them like smoke. Clara felt her breath catch. Marriage to a man she had known for less than a day. It was absurd. It was reckless. It was exactly what she had come to Texas to do in the first place. You do not know anything about me, she managed. I know you traveled 2,000 miles on faith. I know you stood up for yourself when someone tried to treat you like you did not matter. I know you would rather starve than accept charity from a man who betrayed you. His voice was steady, matter of fact. That tells me more than 100 letters ever could. And if we do not suit, what if this is a terrible mistake? Then we figure it out like adults. I am not expecting love, Clara. I am expecting honesty and hard work and mutual respect. Everything else is just hope and possibility. He stood, settling his hat back on his head. You do not have to decide anything tonight. Just come see the ranch tomorrow. See if you can imagine a life there. The rest can wait. Clara sat in stunned silence as he said his goodnights and left. Around her, the other diners were whispering, speculation running wild. She barely heard them. Wyatt Hale had just offered her exactly what Benjamin Porter had promised, but never intended to deliver. Genuine partnership, honest terms, respect without conditions. The difference was, she believed Wyatt. That night, Clara lay awake in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Her mind cataloged all the reasons this was insane. She had known Wyatt Hale for less than 12 hours. He was a stranger. She knew nothing about ranch life. This could be a disaster worse than Benjamin Porter's betrayal. But underneath the panic was something else. A strange, tentative hope. Wyatt had offered her a choice. Not rescue, not pity, but a genuine choice about her own future. And after a lifetime of having her choices made for her by her father's death, her aunt's charity, and Benjamin Porter's lies, the gift of agency felt almost overwhelming. Clara thought about Boston, about her aunt's house where she had never belonged. She thought about the letters from Benjamin Porter, the careful promises that had turned out to be worth less than the paper they were written on. And she thought about Wyatt Hale's calloused hands and steady eyes, about the way he had defended her without expecting anything in return, about the choice he had offered without pressure or strings attached. Maybe the worst day of her life had brought her exactly where she needed to be. As sleep finally claimed her, Clara made a decision. Tomorrow she would visit a ranch she had never seen and consider a future she had never imagined. And whatever happened next, she would face it with her head high and her eyes open. For the first time since stepping off that stagecoach, Clara Dalton felt like maybe, just maybe, the story was not over. It was only beginning. Morning arrived with a clarity that felt almost cruel. Clara woke to sunlight streaming through the thin curtains, and for a blessed moment, she did not remember where she was or why. Then reality settled over her, and she sat up in the narrow bed, her mind already racing with the impossible decision ahead. She dressed carefully in her second-best dress, a practical gray cotton that would not show dust, and pinned her hair into a neat coil at the base of her neck. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a woman who looked older than her 22 years, with shadows under her eyes and a tightness around her mouth that had not been there a week ago. But her eyes were clear, and her hands were steady as she fastened the last button at her collar. Downstairs, Mrs. Grayson had breakfast waiting, eggs and bacon and fresh bread that filled the boarding house with its yeasty warmth. Emma Hartley was already there, and she gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Good morning, Miss Dalton. I hope you slept well." "Well enough, thank you." Clara took the offered seat. "The whole town is talking about last night," Emma said quietly, leaning closer. "What you said to Mr. Hawkins about Mr. Porter, it was magnificent." Clara felt heat creep up her neck. "It was improper. It was honest." Emma's eyes sparkled. "Most women in your situation would have taken the money and smiled politely. You told the truth instead. That takes courage. Or foolishness. Does it matter?" Emma took a sip of her coffee. "You are here now and you have decisions to make. Have you given it any thought to what you will do?" Clara pushed her eggs around her plate, suddenly not hungry despite knowing she needed to eat. "I have been invited to visit the Broken Arrow Ranch today. Mr. Hale suggested there might be work there." The older woman at Emma's table, Miss Agnes Pritchard, the town librarian, looked up with sharp interest. "Wyatt Hale's place?" "Yes, ma'am." "He is a good man," Agnes said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Took over that ranch 5 years ago when it was barely more than a patch of dirt in a falling-down house. Built it up with its own two hands. Never asks for credit he has not earned. Never shirks a debt. You could do far worse than Wyatt Hale." "I am only considering employment," Clara said quickly. "Nothing more." Agnes and Emma exchanged a look that Clara could not quite interpret. "Of course," Emma said smoothly. "Though I should mention that Wyatt has not exactly been looking for hired help before now. He has had the same two ranch hands for years, and he has never mentioned needing someone for the house." The implication hung in the air. Clara took a deliberate bite of bacon to avoid having to respond. At precisely 9 o'clock, Wyatt knocked on the front door. He had dressed with obvious care. Clean denim, a pressed shirt, boots that gleamed with fresh polish. His hair was still damp from washing, and he held his hat in his hands. "Morning," Wade said when Clara opened the door. "Ready?" "As I will ever be." They walked to his wagon together, and Clara was acutely aware of the eyes watching from windows and doorways. The whole town would know within the hour that she had left with Wyatt Hale. The gossip would be relentless. But somehow, out here in the open air with the sun on her face and the possibility of something new stretching ahead like the dusty road, she found she did not care as much as she thought she would. The wagon was sturdy and utilitarian, clearly built for work rather than comfort. Wyatt helped her up onto the bench seat with careful courtesy, then climbed up beside her and took up the reins. The two horses, a matched pair of chestnuts, tossed their heads and stamped, eager to be moving. They rode in silence for the first few minutes, the town falling away behind them, until there was nothing but open land in every direction. Clara had never seen so much space in her life. Boston had been all buildings and cobblestones, every inch accounted for. This was different, vast and empty and somehow both terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. "It is bigger than I expected," she said finally. "Texas." Wyatt glanced at her. "Yeah, it has a way of making everything else seem small. Takes some getting used to." "How long have you been here?" 8 years now. Came out after the war looking for a fresh start, like everyone else." He kept his eyes on the road ahead. "Worked for different ranchers, saved every penny. Finally scraped together enough to buy the broken arrow. It was practically abandoned when I got it. Previous owner drank himself to death, and his widow wanted nothing to do with it. But I saw potential. What kind of potential? The kind that comes from land that can support life if you are willing to work for it. Good water, decent grazing, close enough to town to sell cattle, but far enough away to have some peace. He paused. I am not a fancy man, Miss Dalton. I do not have ambitions to build an empire or make my mark on history. I just want a place that is mine, work that matters, and maybe someday a family to pass it on to. Simple things. Clara studied his profile, trying to reconcile the directness of his words with the complexity of what he was offering. You said yesterday that you were offering me a choice. What exactly does that mean? Wyatt was quiet for a long moment, his hands steady on the reins. When he finally spoke, his words came slowly, as if he was choosing each one with care. It means I am not playing games, and I am not making promises I cannot keep. You need work and a place to stay. I need help running the ranch. Someone to manage the house, keep the books, maybe help with planning and decisions. We could have a business arrangement, purely professional, with wages and clear expectations. Or, Clara prompted, because she could hear the unspoken alternative hanging in the air. Or, we could be honest about the fact that we are both alone in the world, both looking for something more than just survival. You came out here to marry a man you had never met because you believed in the possibility of partnership, of building something together. I am offering the same thing, just without the pretty letters and false promises. He finally looked at her, his blue eyes direct and unwavering. I am offering marriage, Miss Dalton. Not romance, not passion, but partnership and respect. A real chance to build something together. The words hung between them. Clara felt her breath catch, her mind racing. Marriage to a man she had known for less than 24 hours. It was absurd. It was reckless. It was exactly what she had come to Texas to do in the first place. You do not know anything about me, she managed. I know enough. I know you are brave enough to cross a continent on faith. I know you are strong enough to stand up for yourself when it would be easier to accept charity. I know you are smart enough to ask the right questions instead of just accepting pretty promises. His voice softened. And I know that when I saw you standing in that depot yesterday, looking lost and angry and determined not to break, something in me recognized something in you. They rode on in silence as the land around them began to change subtly. A creek cutting through the landscape, trees clustering in small groves, grass that looked greener and more substantial. Clara saw cattle in the distance, their dark shapes moving slowly across a hillside. That is Broken Arrow land, Wyatt said, following her gaze. 500 acres, most of it good grazing. Creek runs through the property year-round, which is rare out here. That water is worth more than gold. They crested a rise and Clara caught her first glimpse of the ranch buildings. The house sat in a natural hollow, sheltered from the wind by a stand of cottonwood trees. It was larger than she had expected, a solid two-story structure made of stone and timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. Beside it sat a barn, a stable, and several smaller outbuildings, all in good repair. You built this yourself? Clara could not keep the surprise from her voice. With help from my ranch hands and a few skilled craftsmen for the technical parts, but yeah, most of it came from these hands. He held up his calloused palms with something like pride. Took 3 years to get the house finished, another year for the barn, still working on improvements. As they drew closer, Clara could see the details. Flower boxes under the windows, though empty now in the summer heat. A vegetable garden beside the house, carefully fenced against animals. A well with a sturdy pump. Everything spoke of care, of attention, of someone who took pride in what he had built. 2 men emerged from the barn as the wagon rolled into the yard. One was young, barely out of his teens, with shaggy dark hair and a lanky frame. The other was older, weathered, with gray in his beard and the bow-legged walk of a man who had spent his life on horseback. Miss Dalton, this is Jake Morrison and Charlie Reeves, Wyatt said as he helped her down from the wagon. They keep this place running when I am too stubborn to ask for help. Boys, this is Miss Clara Dalton. Jake swept off his hat and gave an awkward bow. Ma'am, pleasure to meet you. Charlie's greeting was more reserved, but his eyes were kind. Miss Dalton, why don't you show Miss Dalton around while I check on that fence in the north pasture? Wyatt said to his ranch hands. Then to Clara, unless you would rather wait. I would like to see the place, Clara said, surprising herself with her decisiveness. If that is all right, more than all right. Wyatt's smile was brief but genuine. Boys, treat her like the lady she is and answer her questions honestly. I will be back in an hour. The interior of the house was a revelation. Clara had expected rough bachelor quarters, but what she found was a space that was clean, organized, and surprisingly homey. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall and windows that let in generous amounts of light. But what caught Clara's attention were the books. An entire wall was lined with shelves, and those shelves were packed with volumes. Novels, agricultural journals, histories, even poetry. She moved closer, unable to resist, and ran her finger along the spines. She pulled out a well-worn copy of Walden and found inside the front cover, in a careful hand, someone had written, "To stand alone is to know yourself." Mr. Hale is a big reader, Jake offered. Orders books from back east regulars like. Says a man who does not read is a man who stops growing. Clara replaced the book gently, something warm unfurling in her chest. They showed her the kitchen, compact but efficient. The upstairs bedrooms, empty except for Wyatt's spare room at the end of the hall. One of the empty bedrooms was larger than the others, with windows on two walls and a connecting door to a smaller room. It is a good house, Charlie said, watching her carefully. Needs a woman's touch maybe, but it is solid, built to last. Why is Mr. Hale doing this? Clara asked suddenly. He does not know me. Why would he offer marriage to a complete stranger? Jake and Charlie exchanged a look. Finally, Charlie spoke. Mr. Hale has been alone since he came here. Oh, he is friendly enough, gets along with folks in town, but alone is not the same as lonely. He built this place with his own hands, every board and nail. But what is the point of building something if there is no one to share it with? He could have anyone, Clara protested. He is established, respected. Town women want a different kind of man, Jake said, then blushed. Begging your pardon, ma'am. But Mr. Hale, he is not one for dances and socials and pretty words. He is direct, honest. Some women find that off-putting, and you think I do not? I think you came to Texas to marry a man you had never met based on letters and promises, Charlie said bluntly. That tells me you are practical. You understand that life out here is not about romance. It is about partnership. The sound of hoofbeats drew Clara's attention to the window. Wyatt was riding back toward the house, his posture easy in the saddle. As if he could feel her watching, he looked up, and even from this distance, Clara could see the question in his eyes. When she came back downstairs, Wyatt was waiting on the porch. What do you think? He asked. Clara looked around at the solid house, at the land stretching in every direction, at the two ranch hands trying not to look too interested, at the man who had offered her a choice instead of pity. I think, she said slowly, that we should talk about terms. Something flickered in Wyatt's eyes, surprise, relief, hope. He gestured to the porch chairs. Have a seat. Let us talk. Clara sat down, arranging her skirts, trying to project a confidence she did not quite feel. Wyatt took the chair opposite her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, giving her his full attention. I need to know what you expect, Clara said. You talk about partnership and respect, but what does that actually mean? What would my role be? What rights would I have? Fair questions. Wyatt nodded. If this is just employment, you would manage the house, keep the accounts, help with planning and decisions about the ranch. You would have your own room, your own space. I would pay you $30 a month plus room and board. You could leave any time with 2 weeks' notice, no hard feelings. He paused. And if it is marriage, then it is a true partnership. You would have equal say in decisions about the ranch, access to the accounts, your name on the deed alongside mine. This place would be as much yours as mine, legally and in every other way. And the personal side of things? I will not make demands. We would share a life, but the rest would be your choice, at your pace. I am looking for a wife, Clara, not a possession. Clara's heart was beating fast. And if it does not work, if we marry and then realize we have made a mistake, then we deal with it honestly. I will not trap you here. If you want to leave, I will give you money and help you go wherever you want to go. But I am not planning on this being a mistake. His voice softened. I know this is fast. I know it is unconventional. But I also know that sometimes the best decisions are the ones that feel right, even when they do not make logical sense. Clara took a deep breath. I need conditions. If we do this, if we marry, I need certain things understood. Name them. I want time before we share a bed. I am not saying never, but I need time to know you, to trust you. That part of marriage should come from genuine feeling, not obligation. Agreed. I want to continue my education. I want access to books, to learning. I will not be treated like I am less intelligent or capable because I am a woman. The library is yours and I will order any books you want. As for intelligence, I am counting on yours to keep me from making stupid decisions. Clara almost smiled. I want to say in financial decisions. Real input, not just the illusion of it. If this ranch is going to be partially mine, I want to understand the business and have genuine influence. You will have full access to the books and equal say in all major decisions. I would be a fool not to use your mind as well as your labor. And if I want to leave for any reason, you will let me go without trying to force me to stay or making it difficult. Ooh, Wyatt's expression turned serious. Clara, I will not lie and say I would not try to convince you to stay if you wanted to leave. But I would never force you, never trap you. You would go with money, with help, with whatever you needed to start over somewhere else. You have my word. Your word? Clara studied him, searching for any hint of deception. How do I know I can trust your word? You do not, Wyatt said simply. That is the risk. But I can tell you that in 8 years in this territory, I have never broken my word to anyone. I have never cheated a partner, never shirked a debt, never lied when the truth would do. Ask anyone in redemption. They will tell you the same. My reputation is all I have, and I guard it more carefully than gold. Clara stood and walked to the porch railing, looking out over the ranch. Everything spoke of order, of care, of a life being built with purpose and intention. She thought about her mother who had married Clara's father after knowing him for 3 months and had found genuine happiness. She thought about all the women she had known in Boston who had had long courtships and traditional weddings and had ended up in miserable marriages anyway. Time was no guarantee of happiness. Pretty words were no insurance against betrayal. But honesty, genuine, unflinching honesty, that was something rare and valuable. I have one more condition, she said, turning to face him. What is that? If we do this, we do it soon. I do not want a long engagement, more time for doubts to creep in. If I am going to take this risk, I want to take it before I can talk myself out of it. A slow smile spread across Wyatt's face. How soon? A week, Clara suggested, then shocked herself by saying, or sooner. The preacher could marry us day after tomorrow if we got the license tomorrow. Clara extended her hand, formal and deliberate. On the terms we discussed, yes, I will marry you, Wyatt Hale. His hand closed around hers, warm, calloused, solid. I will do everything in my power to make sure you never regret it. The sound of poorly suppressed cheering came from somewhere near the barn. Wyatt rolled his eyes. Jake, Charlie, you can stop pretending you were not listening. The two ranch hands emerged, not bothering to look sheepish. Jake was beaming, and even Charlie's weathered face had cracked into something approaching a smile. The ride back to town passed in a blur of planning and practical discussion. They would get the license tomorrow, marry the day after at the church if the preacher was available. Small ceremony, just witnesses, and whoever from town wanted to attend. I do not have a wedding dress, Clara said suddenly. Wear whatever you want. I am not marrying your dress. What about a ring? I have got my mother's wedding band. It is simple, but it is real gold, and it meant something. Oh, Wyatt glanced at her. If you would rather have something new, your mother's ring sounds perfect. When they returned to Mrs. Grayson's boarding house, Wyatt helped Clara down from the wagon. Before her feet had fully touched the ground, the front door burst open. Mrs. Grayson stood on the threshold, arms crossed. Well, Do not keep me in suspense. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks but lifted her chin. We are getting married day after tomorrow, if the preacher is available. Mrs. Grayson's stern expression cracked into a wide smile. I knew it. The moment I saw Wyatt carry your trunk yesterday, I knew exactly how this would end. She stepped aside. Come in. We have plans to make, and precious little time to make them. The parlor had somehow filled with people. Emma Hartley, Agnes Pritchard, and two other women Clara did not recognize, all wore expressions of barely contained curiosity. Ladies, Mrs. Grayson announced, Miss Clara Dalton has agreed to marry Mr. Wyatt Hale this coming Saturday. The room erupted. Emma embraced Clara enthusiastically. Agnes nodded with satisfaction. The other women offered congratulations with varying degrees of surprise. This is highly irregular, one woman said, though her tone suggested intrigue rather than scandal. Irregular is one word for it, Wyatt said mildly, but then nothing about Clara's arrival and redemption has been conventional. We have work to do, Mrs. Grayson clapped her hands. Saturday is 2 days away. Tomorrow we handle the license and notify the preacher. I have my late daughter's wedding dress stored in the attic. Sarah was about your size, Clara. She would be happy to know it was being put to good use. The older woman's voice softened. Sarah died of fever 5 years ago, just before her first anniversary. I think she would approve of you wearing it. Mrs. Grayson, I could not possibly. You can, and you will, unless you would rather get married in that gray cotton you are wearing. The next morning, Clara and Wyatt walked to the courthouse together. The clerk, a bored-looking man named Henry, perked up considerably when he realized why they were there. Marriage license. He pulled out the necessary forms. Names? Wyatt James Hale and Clara Elizabeth Dalton. The pen scratched across paper, recording information that would change both their lives. Date of birth, place of birth, current residence. You are the lady who came in on the stage Monday, are you not? Henry asked Clara. The one who was supposed to marry Ben Porter? Clara felt her jaw tighten. I am. Well, I suppose that did not work out. No, Clara said coldly. It did not. Wyatt's hand found the small of her back, a gentle touch of support. Are we done here, Henry, or do you want to discuss the lady's private business a bit more publicly? Henry flushed and turned back to the forms. That will be $2 for the license. Outside, Clara took a deep breath. Does everyone in this town know my business? Everyone in this town knows everyone's business, Wyatt corrected. It is the price of living somewhere this small, but it cuts both ways. They will gossip about you, but they will also look out for you. They walked to the church next. Reverend Thomas was in his garden, tending vegetables. He looked up as they approached, his weathered face breaking into a smile. Wyatt Hale as I live and breathe, and this must be Miss Dalton I have been hearing so much about. We would like to get married, Wyatt said simply. Tomorrow, if you are available. The preacher's eyebrows rose. Tomorrow, that is rather sudden, is it not? We have our reasons, Clara said, lifting her chin. Reverend Thomas studied them both for a long moment. I will not marry two people who are making a mistake just because they are running from something. Are you sure about this, both of you? I am sure, Wyatt said without hesitation. I am sure too, Clara added. I know it looks impulsive, but it is not thoughtless. We have discussed terms. We know what we are agreeing to, and we are going into this with our eyes open. The preacher's stern expression cracked into a smile. Well, I will be damned. Pardon my language. That is the most sensible approach to marriage I have heard in 30 years. Most couples come to me with their heads in the clouds. You two sound like you might actually make it. Does that mean you will do it? Wyatt asked. It means I will, but only after I have had a chance to speak with each of you privately. He led Clara on a slow walk around the church grounds. For a long moment he said nothing, and Clara grew nervous. Tell me about your father, he said finally. The question surprised her, but she answered honestly, describing her father's dedication to his patients, his kindness, his belief in service. And when he died, what happened to you? Clara explained about her aunt, about the suffocating charity, about feeling like a burden. So you answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride. I did. I wanted a home of my own, a partnership with someone who valued more than just my ability to be decorative and silent. And now you are about to marry another man you barely know based on different promises. How do you know Wyatt Hale will not disappoint you the same way? I do not know, not for certain, Clara admitted, but Benjamin Porter's promises were pretty words on paper, sent from a distance designed to secure what he wanted. Wyatt's promises were made face to face with witnesses, with concrete terms we both agreed to. He is offering partnership, not romance, honesty, not poetry, and somehow that feels more trustworthy. Reverend Thomas nodded slowly. You remind me of my late wife. She was practical too. Everyone thought we were an odd match, but we were happy together for 43 years. You know why? Why? Because we respected each other's strengths and forgave each other's weaknesses. Because we talked, even when talking was hard. Because we chose each other every day, not just on our wedding day. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. If you can do that, Clara, if you can keep choosing Wyatt, even on the days when it would be easier not to, then you will build something that lasts. I intend to. Good. Then I will marry you tomorrow with a clear conscience. 10 o'clock if that suits you. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of preparation. The dress fitting, which proved surprisingly perfect, the gathering of flowers by helpful townswomen, the baking of bread and pies for a small reception. That night, lying in her narrow bed at the boarding house, Clara thought about the decision she had made. Tomorrow she would marry Wyatt Hale. Tomorrow she would bind her life legally and spiritually to a man she had known for 3 days. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt a strange peace. She had made her choice, and whatever happened next, she would face it with courage. The morning of Clara's wedding arrived with startling clarity. She woke before dawn, her heart racing, but not with fear, with anticipation. Mrs. Grayson brought breakfast to her room. Emma arrived to help with her hair. The dress, Sarah's dress, slipped over her head like cream-colored silk, cool and smooth against her skin. Something old, Mrs. Grayson said, fastening a cameo brooch at Clara's throat. This was my mother's. Something new, Emma added, presenting a pair of kid gloves. Something borrowed, Agnes said, appearing into the doorway with a delicate lace handkerchief. And something blue. Mrs. Chen stepped forward with a silk ribbon the color of summer sky, which she wove into Clara's hair. Clara looked at herself in the mirror and saw a bride staring back. Pale, serious, but undeniably a bride. They walked through Redemption streets in a small procession. People stopped to stare, some smiling, some frowning, all fascinated. Let them stare. This was her life, her choice, her future. The church doors stood open. Inside, Wyatt waited at the altar with Jake and Charlie flanking him. He wore a dark suit, white shirt, string tie. His face was pale but determined, his eyes finding hers the moment she stepped through the doorway. The church was half full with curious townspeople. Clara kept her gaze fixed on Wyatt, using him as an anchor. When she reached the altar, Wyatt extended his hand. Clara placed hers in it, feeling the calloused warmth of his palm, the slight tremor that told her he was just as nervous as she was. Reverend Ahmed smiled at them both. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Wyatt James Hale and Clara Elizabeth Dalton in holy matrimony. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, but reverently, thoughtfully, and in the knowledge that this bond is both a joy and a responsibility. The ceremony proceeded with familiar rhythms, the questions asked and answered, the vows spoken in voices that started uncertain but grew stronger with each word. With this ring I thee wed, Wyatt said, slipping his mother's gold band onto Clara's finger. It fit perfectly, settling into place as if it had always belonged there. By the power vested in me by the territory of Texas, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Wyatt, you may kiss your bride. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Wyatt leaned forward slowly, giving Clara time to retreat if she wanted. She did not retreat. She met him halfway, and their lips touched in a kiss that was brief and chaste, and somehow more meaningful than any passionate embrace could have been. When they pulled apart, Clara saw something shift in Wyatt's expression. Wonder, perhaps, or maybe just relief. The church erupted in applause. The reception at Mrs. Grayson's boarding house was simple but warm. Ham and eggs, fresh bread, pastries. Jake offered an enthusiastic toast that made everyone laugh. Then it was time to leave. Time to go to the Broken Arrow to start their life together. As Wyatt helped Clara into the wagon, she caught a glimpse of Benjamin Porter across the street, watching from the bank entrance. Their eyes met for a moment. He looked uncomfortable, perhaps regretful. Clara felt nothing but a distant gratitude that he had been too cowardly to keep his word. The ride to the ranch was different this time. Clara was not a potential employee or a bride-to-be. She was Mrs. Hale, partner, wife, co-owner of the Broken Arrow. Someone had hung a banner across the porch. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hale," painted in slightly crooked letters. "Jake's work," Wyatt said. "He was up at dawn making that sign." "It is perfect," Clara said, and meant it. The first weeks of marriage settled into a rhythm that was both strange and comforting. Clara woke early, as did everyone on a working ranch. She learned to collect eggs without getting pecked, to tend the garden, to read weather signs in the clouds. She took over the cooking duties, discovering she enjoyed feeding the men who worked so hard. Her meals were simple at first, but she experimented and slowly grew more confident. The account books became her domain. She spent hours understanding the economics of ranch life, learning to anticipate expenses. Wyatt consulted her on every significant decision, treating her input as valuable rather than perfunctory. When she suggested selling some cattle earlier than planned to take advantage of a price spike, he listened and agreed. Her advice proved sound. They worked side by side without awkwardness, falling into a partnership that felt natural. But underneath the easy companionship, there was an awareness neither acknowledged openly. The way Wyatt's hand would linger on Clara's waist when he helped her. The way Clara found herself watching him work, admiring the capable strength of his movements. They were married but not truly intimate, partners but not yet lovers, sharing a house and a life but maintaining careful boundaries. 1 month after the wedding, Clara made her first visit back to Redemption for the monthly ladies' social. She walked into Mrs. Grayson's parlor with her head high, prepared for judgment. Instead, she found acceptance. Emma embraced her warmly. Agnes nodded approval. Even the women who had been skeptical seemed impressed by how well Clara had adapted to ranch life. As Clara was leaving the general store with her parcels, she encountered Benjamin Porter face to face for the first time since her arrival. He stopped dead, his expression cycling through surprise, discomfort, and what might have been regret. Mrs. Hale, I heard you had married. Congratulations." Clara studied the man who had brought her to Texas with false promises. She tried to feel the anger and hurt she had carried for so long, but all she felt was a distant pity and a profound gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Porter. I hope married life is treating you well." "It is. She is settling in." He shifted his weight. "I owe you an apology, Mrs. Hale, for how I handled things, for the cowardice of not facing you myself." "You do," Clara agreed calmly, "but I have decided not to hold on to that anger. Turns out you did me a favor, though I doubt that was your intention. If you had kept your promises, I would be married to a man I did not love, living a life I did not want. Instead, I have exactly what I came to Texas looking for: partnership, respect, and a chance to build something meaningful." Porter's face reddened. "I am glad it worked out for you, truly." "I am sure you are. Now, if you will excuse me, my husband is waiting." Clara moved past him with her head high, feeling Wyatt's gaze on her from where he stood by the wagon. When she reached him, he took her parcels and helped her up onto the seat. "You all right?" he asked quietly. "More than all right. I just realized I am not angry anymore. Not at Porter, not at my aunt, not at any of it. It all led me here, and here is exactly where I want to be." Wyatt's hand found hers on the seat between them. "Even on the days when ranch life is hard, when the cattle are difficult and the weather is uncooperative and your stubborn husband is being particularly impossible." "Especially on those days," Clara said firmly, "because even the hard days with you are better than the easy days without you." The months rolled by. Summer's heat gave way to autumn's tempered beauty. Clara learned to preserve food, to stockpile supplies, to plan for winter. She and Wyatt worked side by side, their partnership tested by long days and hard decisions, but never breaking. Their relationship remained chaste, respectful. Clara had her own room, Wyatt had his. They shared meals and work and conversation, building trust one day at a time. But the awareness was always there, humming beneath the surface. The accidental touches that lasted a moment too long. The way they would both reach for something at the same time, hands meeting, eyes locking. The nights when Clara would lie in her bed, knowing Wyatt was just down the hall, wondering when the right moment would come. 3 months after the wedding, Charlie spoke to Clara in the kitchen one morning while she was kneading bread. "Mrs. Hale, I hope you will forgive an old man for speaking out of turn." Clara looked up from her dough. "Of course, Charlie. What is on your mind?" "It is about Mr. Hale, about you and him." Charlie shifted uncomfortably. "He is healing well enough in spirit, but there is a restlessness in him that worries me. He watches you when you are not looking, like a man dying of thirst staring at water he cannot reach. And you do the same to him." Heat flooded Clara's cheeks. "Charlie, I do not think—" "I know it is not my place to say anything, but I have known Wyatt for 5 years now. Watched him build this ranch from nothing. I have never seen him as happy as he has been these past months with you here. But there is a wall between you two still, and it is not doing either of you any good." Charlie met her eyes directly. "Whatever is holding you back, Mrs. Hale, whether it is propriety or fear or something else, life is too short and too hard out here to waste time being cautious about the things that matter." Before Clara could respond, he had already retreated, leaving her alone with her bread dough and racing thoughts. He was right, of course. They were married, partners in every way except the most intimate. They had acknowledged their growing feelings for each other. So what was stopping them? Fear, Clara realized. She was afraid that if she gave herself completely to this marriage, to this man, she would have nothing left to protect herself with if it all fell apart. But Wyatt was not Benjamin Porter. He had proven that 100 times over. When would she finally let herself trust that? When would she stop protecting herself from a betrayal that might never come? That evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Clara made a decision. "Wyatt, I need to talk to you about something." He set aside his book, giving her his full attention. "That sounds serious. What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong." Clara took a breath. "Charlie spoke to me this morning about us, about the fact that we are married but still maintaining this distance." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "I will talk to him. He had no right—" "He was right, though," Clara interrupted. "We have been circling each other for months, acknowledging that something has changed between us, but not acting on it. And I have been thinking about why that is, at least for me." "And why is it?" "Because I am afraid," Clara admitted. "Because Benjamin Porter taught me that promises can be broken and hope can be dangerous. Because if I give myself completely to this marriage, to you, and then something goes wrong—" Wyatt reached out and took her hand. "Then you would be hurt, devastated probably." "I understand that fear, Clara. I have it too." "You do?" "Of course, I am terrified that one day you will wake up and realize you could have done better, that you settled for a simple rancher when you deserve so much more." He squeezed her hand. "But I have been thinking a lot these past weeks, and I realized something important. Fear is no way to live. Protecting ourselves from potential hurt means also protecting ourselves from potential joy. A life lived cautiously is still a life half-lived. I do not want to live cautiously with you, Clara. I want to live fully, completely, even if that means risking hurt. Because the alternative, keeping this distance, never taking the chance, that is a guarantee of emptiness rather than just a risk of pain." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "When did you become so wise?" "Around the time a stubborn, brilliant woman agreed to marry me and then proceeded to turn my entire world upside down in." He tugged gently on her hand, pulling her closer. "I love you. I have been trying to find the right time to say it, but there is no such thing. So I am saying it now, plainly and honestly. I love you, Clara Hale, and I am tired of pretending otherwise." "I love you too," Clara whispered. "I think I have for weeks now, but I was too scared to admit it." "Nothing is going to take this away," Wyatt promised. "Life might throw challenges at us, but this, us, what we have built together, that is solid. That is real." Clara leaned forward and kissed him, and this time it was not chaste or brief. It was deep and honest and full of all the longing they had been holding back for months. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Wyatt smiled. "So, Mrs. Hale, I believe you mentioned something about when I was feeling better, when you were ready." "I am ready," Clara said softly. "I have been ready for weeks. I was just too stubborn to admit it." And there, in the firelight of their home, Clara and Wyatt finally became husband and wife in every sense of the word. Not with passion born of false romance, but with tenderness born of genuine love and hard-won trust. Winter settled over the Broken Arrow with surprising gentleness. Clara had feared the isolation, the long, dark months trapped indoors. Instead, she discovered a quiet joy in the season. She and Wyatt spent evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other, discussing ranch business, making plans for spring. The boundaries between them had dissolved completely now. Clara had moved her belongings into Wyatt's room, and they slept tangled together each night, finding warmth and comfort in closeness. The ranch work continued despite the cold. Cattle needed tending. Fences required checking. Wood had to be chopped and stacked. Clara helped where she could, learning new skills, becoming more capable with each passing week. She was in the kitchen one February afternoon, kneading bread dough when she felt the first wave of nausea. She pushed it aside, assuming she had eaten something that disagreed with her, but the nausea returned the next morning, and the next. When she missed her monthly courses for the second time, Clara could no longer deny what was happening. She was pregnant. The realization brought a complicated rush of emotions. Joy, certainly, a fierce protectiveness for this new life growing inside her, but also fear. Fear of childbirth in a place where medical care was limited. Fear of losing this precious gift. Fear of all the ways this could go wrong. She remembered her mother dying when Clara was 12, remembered her father's devastation. For 3 days, she kept the news to herself, trying to sort through her feelings. But on the evening of the third day, as they sat by the fire, Wyatt set down his book and looked at her with concern. "Clara, what is wrong? You have been distant all week." Clara took a breath. "Not ill. Pregnant." The word hung in the air. Wyatt's eyes went wide, and for a moment he seemed incapable of speech. Then a smile broke across his face like sunrise. "Pregnant? You are sure?" "As sure as I can be to ye. All the signs are there." Wyatt was across the room in an instant, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "Clara, that is wonderful. We are going to have a baby." His joy was so pure, so absolute, that it cracked something open in Clara's chest. "You are not worried?" she asked. "Worried? Why would I be worried?" Then he felt her trembling and pulled back to look at her face. "Clara, sweetheart, what is wrong? This is good news, is it not?" "It is terrifying news," Clara admitted. "Childbirth is dangerous, Wyatt. Women die. My mother died. And we are miles from town, from any real medical help. What if something goes wrong?" Wyatt's hands cupped her face. "Yes, childbirth can be dangerous. Yes, we are remote. But Clara, you are strong and healthy, and we have months to prepare. We will bring a doctor out from town before your time comes. We will make sure you have everything you need, and I will be right there with you every step of the way. You cannot promise that nothing will go wrong." "No, I cannot, but I can promise that we will face whatever comes together, just like we have faced everything else." Over the following weeks, Clara's pregnancy became obvious. Wyatt became almost comically protective, trying to prevent her from doing anything remotely strenuous until she finally snapped at him. "I am pregnant, not made of glass. Women have been working through pregnancy since the dawn of time." They compromised, as they always did. Clara continued to cook and manage the household, but let Jake take over the heavier garden work. The women of redemption rallied around Clara, her perform, with surprising warmth. Mrs. Grayson visited regularly with advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Emma and Agnes organized a quilting bee. But then, in early March, disaster struck. A spring storm rolled in with unusual ferocity, bringing torrential rain and winds that threatened to tear the roof off the barn. Wyatt, Jake, and Charlie worked frantically to secure the livestock and property. Through the rain-streaked windows, Clara saw Wyatt riding hard toward the north pasture, where some cattle had broken through a damaged fence. She watched him disappear into the storm-darkened landscape, her heart in her throat. 2 hours passed, then 3. The storm began to ease, but there was no sign of Wyatt. Jake and Charlie rode out to find him. Clara paced the house, unable to sit still, unable to think of anything except the 100 ways a man could be hurt or killed in a storm. When they finally returned, Wyatt was slumped in his saddle, his face gray with pain. A branch had caught him across the ribs when his horse had spooked. Though he had managed to get the cattle secured and ride back, it was clear he was seriously hurt. Clara took charge with calm decisiveness. Years of helping her father with patience kicked in. "Get him inside and upstairs," she ordered Jake and Charlie. "I will gather supplies." By the time they had maneuvered Wyatt onto his bed, Clara had assembled everything she needed. Hot water, clean cloths, medical supplies. "Out," she told Jake and Charlie. "I will call if I need you." Wyatt tried to protest as she began unbuttoning his soaked shirt. "Clara, you do not have to. Be quiet and let me work." Her voice was firm. "You are hurt, and I have done this before. My father was a physician, remember?" She peeled away his wet clothing with clinical efficiency, trying not to think about the intimacy of the situation. Focus on the injury, not on the hard planes of muscle, the scars that spoke of a difficult life. The damage was significant. Extensive bruising, possibly a cracked rib or two. Clara worked methodically, checking for internal bleeding, wrapping his ribs to provide support, administering limited pain relief. "You are good at this," Wyatt said through gritted teeth. "My father taught me well." Clara's hands were steady as she worked, though inside she was shaking. When she had seen him slumped in that saddle, something inside her had clenched with unbearable fear. When she finished bandaging his ribs, she made him drink some whiskey. He was shivering despite the blankets, his body in shock. "You need to warm up," she said decisively. "Your temperature is too low." "I will be fine, just need to rest." "Wyatt Hale, you will do as I say, or I swear I will tie you to this bed. I have seen men die from injuries less severe than this because they were too stubborn to accept proper care." She spent the rest of the day monitoring him, checking for fever, making sure he drank water. But as night deepened, his condition worsened. His temperature spiked, and he began to shake violently. Clara knew the signs. His body was fighting shock. She needed to warm him faster, more effectively. Without allowing herself to overthink it, she stripped down to her chemise and climbed into the bed beside him, wrapping her body around his, using her own warmth to combat the chill in his bones. It was a technique her father had used for patients in shock, practical and effective. Wyatt's arm came around her instinctively, pulling her closer. Clara pressed against him, willing her warmth into his cold flesh, one hand on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Clara," he mumbled, half delirious with pain and fever. "Do not leave." "I'm not leaving," she whispered. "I am right here. I am not going anywhere." Scared, when the branch hit me, thought I might not make it back. Thought about you waiting, not knowing, could not bear that. Clara's throat tightened. "You made it back. You are going to be fine. Do not want to lose this. Lose you. Just found you. You are not going to lose me. We made a bargain, remember? Partnership. That means I stand with you through the hard parts, not just the easy ones." He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. "You are remarkable, Clara." "I am practical," she said, but her voice wavered. "You are brave," he insisted. "Married a stranger. And now you are lying in bed with your husband, trying to keep him from dying of shock. If that is not brave, I do not know what is." Clara felt something shift inside her. Some wall she had been maintaining beginning to crumble. This man had given her a choice when no one else would, had offered her partnership and respect, had kept every promise, had never once made her feel less than equal. And somewhere along the way, respect had turned into something deeper. "Wyatt," she said softly, but he had already drifted into sleep, his breathing evening out, his body finally accepting the warmth she offered. Clara lay beside him through the long night, feeling his chest rise and fall beneath her hand, listening to the steady beat of his heart. By morning, his fever had broken. Clara awoke to find him watching her with clear eyes. "Morning," he said quietly. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed. You were hurt. Where else would I be, Emily? You could have left me to manage on my own, but you stayed." He gestured at their tangled position. Thank you. Clara started to pull away, suddenly aware of how improper their position was, but Wyatt's arm tightened around her. Do not. Not yet, please. So she stayed, and they lay there in the morning light, finally allowing themselves to be close in a new way. Clara, Wyatt's voice was hesitant. Do you regret it? Marrying me? Taking this leap? She thought about that, really thought about the fear and uncertainty, but also about the partnership they had built, the easy companionship, the way he made her feel valued and capable and seen. No, she said softly, honestly. No, I do not regret it. Do you? Not for a second. Best decision I ever made asking you to choose me. His hand came up to cup her face. I know we said this was practical, not romantic. But Clara, somewhere along the way, you became more to me than just a partner. You became everything. There in the morning light, Clara Hale realized that somewhere along the way, she had fallen in love with the man she had married for practical reasons. She leaned forward and kissed him gently, carefully, mindful of his injuries. Does this mean what I think it means? Wyatt asked. It means our practical partnership might be turning into something more. I have been open to that since the day I saw you standing in that depot, Wyatt said. I just did not want to push. They stayed like that until Jake knocked, calling to ask if Mr. Hale needed anything. Tonight, Wyatt said as Clara reluctantly pulled away. When I am feeling better, when you are ready, maybe you could come back. Not for any particular reason. Just to talk, to be together. Clara squeezed his hand. I would like that. And as she slipped from the room, Clara realized that the worst day of her life, standing abandoned in that depot, really had led her exactly where she needed to be. To partnership, to respect, and maybe, just maybe, to love. The weeks following Wyatt's injury transformed everything. Clara moved through the house with new purpose. No longer the uncertain bride, but the true mistress of the broken arrow. She tended Wyatt's healing ribs with practiced efficiency, and Wyatt, for his part, proved to be a difficult patient. He chafed against forced rest, tried to return to work too soon, and generally drove Clara to distraction. But underneath his protests, she saw something that made her heart soften. He was allowing her to care for him, to see him vulnerable. Their evenings fell into a new pattern. After supper, when Jake and Charlie had retreated to the bunkhouse, Clara would bring her mending or a book to Wyatt's room. They would sit together, sometimes talking, sometimes reading in companionable silence. And when the hour grew late, Clara would check his bandages one final time, make sure he had water within reach. Then she would return to her own room, lying awake, wondering when the right moment would come to stop maintaining this careful distance. It was April when everything changed again. Clara was in the garden one warm afternoon planting vegetables when the first real contractions hit. They started as a dull ache in her lower back, easily dismissed. But over the next hour, they intensified. Clara realized with a mixture of terror and excitement that her time had come. Emma, she said, keeping her voice calm, I think you need to fetch Wyatt and send somebody to town for the doctor. Emma's eyes went wide. But you are not due for another 2 weeks. Babies do not always follow schedules. Go, please. The next hours were a blur. Wyatt came running, his face pale but determined. Mrs. Grayson arrived, taking charge with practiced efficiency. The doctor made it from town just in time. But it was hard, harder than Clara had imagined. The pain came in waves that stole her breath. She gripped Wyatt's hand hard enough to bruise, and he never once flinched. Never once suggested he should leave. You are doing beautifully, he whispered. So strong. I am in awe of you. I am not brave, she gasped. I am terrified. Being brave does not mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway. When the baby finally arrived in the early hours of the morning, his cry piercing the exhausted quiet, Clara wept with relief and joy. A son, the doctor announced. Healthy lungs, good color, perfect in every way. Clara looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled, and absolutely beautiful, and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. Hello, Eli, she whispered, using the name they had chosen weeks ago. Welcome to the Broken Arrow. Wyatt sat beside her on the bed, one arm around Clara and the other cradling their son. His eyes were wet with tears he did not bother to hide. "He is perfect," Wyatt said. "Clara, you are perfect. This is perfect." "I know," Clara said, leaning into him. "I feel it too." The months that followed Eli's birth were exhausting and joyful. Clara learned to navigate the demands of motherhood while still managing the household. It was harder than she had anticipated. The sleepless nights, the constant vigilance. But it was also more rewarding than she could have imagined. Wyatt proved to be a devoted father, rising with Clara for nighttime feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours simply holding his son and talking to him about the ranch. Watching him with Eli, Clara fell in love with her husband all over again. Jake and Charlie treated Eli like a mascot, doting on him. The townspeople of Redemption embraced the newest resident with genuine warmth. On a warm summer evening, almost exactly a year after their hasty wedding, Clara and Wyatt stood on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the ranch they had built together. Eli slept peacefully in Wyatt's arms. "You know what I realized today?" Wyatt said quietly. "What is that?" "A year ago, I was standing in that depot watching a stranger get her heart broken, and I had no idea my entire life was about to change. If I had known what was coming, all the challenges and adjustments, I might have been terrified." He shifted Eli carefully. "And now I would not change a single thing, not one moment, hard parts included, because all of it led us here. To this moment, this family, this life." Clara thought about that journey, the stagecoach ride, the humiliation of Porter's betrayal, the terror of marrying a stranger, the slow building of trust and partnership and love. "The worst day of my life led me here," she said softly. "No, sweetheart." Wyatt kissed the top of her head. "You led yourself here. The worst day of your life just gave you the push you needed to find your way." They stood like that as darkness fell. Three people who formed a family, bound by choice rather than convention, by genuine love rather than societal expectation. Clara had come to Texas as someone else's discarded bride, but she had become Clara Hale, partner, wife, mother, architect of her own destiny. She had been told she had been replaced, that her journey had been for nothing, until a cowboy with steady blue eyes had said 5 words that changed everything. "Then she is free to choose me." And she had chosen courage over fear, partnership over safety, possibility over certainty. In doing so, she had found not just love, but herself, the woman she was always meant to become, strong enough to build a life from nothing, brave enough to trust again, wise enough to recognize that sometimes the best things come from the wreckage of broken plans. Eli grew from a tiny red-faced newborn into a sturdy infant with Wyatt's blue eyes and Clara's determined chin. At 6 months old, he was already trying to crawl, much to everyone's delight and Clara's mild terror. "He is going to be trouble," Charlie predicted one morning, watching Eli scoot across the floor toward a pile of kindling. "Just like his father." "Hey now," Wyatt protested, but he was grinning as he scooped up his son. Clara watched from the kitchen, her hands covered in bread dough, her heart full. This was her life now, the ranch house filled with laughter and baby babble, the easy camaraderie between Wyatt and his ranch hands, the rhythm of seasons and work and family. It was nothing like the life she had imagined in Boston. It was better. The Broken Arrow continued to prosper. The cattle business was doing well, thanks to careful management and Clara's shrewd business sense. They had paid down more of the mortgage, made improvements to the property, started planning for expansion. Clara had found her place not just as Wyatt's wife, but as a true partner in the ranch operation. She kept the books, negotiated with buyers, made strategic decisions about when to buy and sell. The townspeople had long since stopped gossiping about the hasty marriage. Clara was simply Mrs. Hale now, a respected member of the community. She attended church socials, helped with school fundraisers, and had become good friends with Emma and Agnes. One afternoon in late October, almost 18 months after her arrival in Redemption, Clara made a trip to town for supplies. As she was loading packages into the wagon, she saw Benjamin Porter across the street with his wife Sarah. Sarah was heavily pregnant, Clara noticed, perhaps 7 or 8 months along. Porter saw Clara at the same moment. For an instant, their eyes met. Then he quickly looked away, hurrying Sarah in the opposite direction. Clara felt nothing. No anger, no bitterness, not even curiosity. That chapter of her life was so completely closed that she could barely remember the woman who had stepped off the stagecoach, heartbroken and lost. "Ready to head home?" Wyatt asked, appearing beside her with the last of their purchases. "More than ready," Clara said, smiling up at him. On the ride back to the ranch, Clara told Wyatt about seeing Porter. "How did that make you feel?" he asked. "Nothing," Clara said honestly. "I felt nothing at all. He is just a stranger who happens to live in the same town. Someone I used to know in another life." She took Wyatt's hand. "Do you know what I realized? If Porter had kept his word, I would have married him. I would have been miserable, probably, living in town with a man who valued my connections more than me, having a completely different life. And instead I have everything I never knew I wanted: a real partnership, work that matters, a home I helped build, a husband I love, a son I adore." She squeezed his hand. "The best thing Benjamin Porter ever did for me was break his promise." Wyatt laughed. "I should probably send him a thank you note." "Do not you dare." That evening, after Eli was asleep and the house was quiet, Clara and Wyatt sat on the porch watching the stars come out. "I got a letter from my aunt today," Clara said. Wyatt looked at her in surprise. "You did? What did she say?" "She wanted to know if I was well, if I needed anything. She said she regretted how things ended between us." Clara shook her head. "She included money, $50 as a gift," she said, "to help with the baby." "What are you going to do?" I already wrote back. I told her I was well, that I did not need money, that I had built a good life here. I thanked her for her concern, but explained that I was happy where I was. Clara leaned against Wyatt's shoulder. "I also told her that sometimes the things that seem like disasters turn out to be blessings in disguise. That being forced to leave Boston was the best thing that ever happened to me." "Do you really believe that?" "I do. Every word." She tilted her head to look up at him. "I am not the same person I was when I left Boston. That Clara was scared and uncertain, always looking for approval, never quite believing she was good enough. And now? Now I know exactly who I am. I am strong and capable. I am a good mother, a good wife, a good partner. I help run a successful ranch. I have friends who value me. I have a husband who treats me as an equal." She smiled. "I like who I have become, Wyatt, and I never would have found her if everything had not fallen apart first." Wyatt pulled her closer. "I am glad you found her. I am glad you found me. I am glad for all of it, even the hard parts. Even my terrible bread that first month." "Even that," he said solemnly, then laughed when she swatted his arm. Inside the house, Eli began to fuss. Clara rose to tend to him, but Wyatt gently pushed her back down. "I will get him. You rest." Clara watched her husband disappear into the house, then turned her gaze back to the stars. The same stars that had shone over Boston, over the long journey west, over the depot where her old life had ended. She thought about the woman she had been, so desperate to escape her aunt's charity that she had agreed to marry a stranger, so heartbroken by Porter's betrayal that she had almost given up entirely. That woman had been brave, even if she had not known it at the time. Brave enough to travel 2,000 miles into the unknown. Brave enough to stand up for herself when it would have been easier to accept $20 and go home. Brave enough to take a chance on Wyatt when every rational thought said it was madness. And that bravery had led to this, to a life richer and fuller than anything she could have planned or predicted. Wyatt returned with Eli, who was wide awake and babbling happily. They sat together on the porch, the three of them, as the night deepened around them. "What are you thinking about?" Wyatt asked. "Choices," Clara said, "about how one choice made in desperation and defiance led to everything good in my life." She took Eli from Wyatt's arms, kissing the top of her son's head. "I chose you in that depot. Even before I knew I was choosing you. I chose not to accept defeat. I chose not to let Porter's betrayal to define me. I chose courage over comfort. And I am so grateful you did," Wyatt said softly. Clara looked around at the ranch, at the house they had built, at the family they had created. She thought about the year and a half since she had arrived in Redemption. All the work, all the challenges, all the moments of doubt and fear, but also all the joy, all the love, all the ordinary, extraordinary moments that made up a life. Me too, she said. I am grateful too. 2 years after Clara's arrival and redemption, the Broken Arrow Ranch hosted its first harvest celebration. It was Wyatt's idea, a way to thank their neighbors and friends for their support. The yard filled with people, families from surrounding ranches, townspeople from Redemption, Emma and Agnes, Mrs. Grayson, even Mrs. Chen and her family. Long tables groaned under the weight of food. Children ran and played, men discussed cattle and weather, women exchanged recipes and gossip. Clara moved through the crowd, Eli toddling beside her, accepting compliments and well wishes. She caught Wyatt's eye across the yard, and he smiled at her. That slow, warm smile that still made her heart skip. Quite a turnout, Emma said, coming to stand beside Clara. You and Wyatt have built something special here. We have been lucky, Clara said. Luck had nothing to do with it, Agnes interjected, joining them. You worked hard, both of you. You built this together, piece by piece, Clara watched Wyatt swing Eli up onto his shoulders, making their son shriek with delight. Jake and Charlie were demonstrating rope tricks to a group of fascinated children. The ranch hands they had hired last spring were helping serve food. This was her life. This was her family, both blood and chosen. Clara Hale, as I live and breathe. Clara turned to find Reverend Thomas approaching, a broad smile on his weathered face. Reverend Thomas, I am so glad you could come. Would not have missed it. He looked around approvingly. You have done well, both of you. Built exactly what I hoped you would when I married you that day. You had doubts, Clara said. It was not a question. Of course I had doubts. You had known each other 3 days. Any sensible person would have doubts. He chuckled. But I also saw something in both of you. A willingness to do the work. An understanding that marriage is not about feelings, it is about choices. Choosing each other, day after day, even when it is hard. It has not been hard, Clara said. Challenging sometimes, yes, but not hard. Not with Wyatt. That is because you chose well, both of you. As the sun began to set, Wyatt called for everyone's attention. He stood on the porch, Eli in his arms, Clara beside him. I want to thank you all for coming today, he said. 2 years ago, the Broken Arrow was just me and 2 ranch hands trying to scrape by. Now it is a home, a family, and that is because of this woman right here. He looked at Clara, his eyes full of love. Clara came to Texas expecting one life and found herself facing something completely different. She could have run, could have gone back to Boston, back to safety. Instead, she took a chance on a stranger with a half-built ranch and a whole lot of hope. She has made this place into something I never could have built alone. She has given me a son. She has given me a partnership that makes every challenge easier and every joy sweeter. He raised his glass. To Clara, my wife, my partner, my best friend, thank you for choosing me. Everyone raised their glasses, echoing the toast. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by the love and acceptance surrounding her. Later, after the guests had gone and Eli was asleep, Clara and Wyatt stood on the porch in the gathering darkness. That was quite a speech, Clara said. I meant every word. I know you did. She leaned against him. Do you ever think about that day at the depot? What would have happened if you had not stepped in? Sometimes, Wyatt admitted. You probably would have taken Porter's money and gone back to Boston, maybe found work there, maybe eventually married someone else. And you? I would still be here, still alone, still building this ranch with no one to share it with. He pulled her closer. I think about how close we came to missing each other. If I had been 10 minutes later to town that day, if I had decided it was not my business to interfere, if you had accepted Porter's offer. But we did not miss each other, Clara said. We found each other exactly when we were supposed to. She turned to face him fully. You gave me a choice that day, Wyatt. Real choice, real agency over my own life. And I will never forget that. You did not try to rescue me or save me. You just offered me an option and let me decide. Best decision you ever made, Wyatt said with a grin. Second best, Clara corrected. The best decision was trusting that choice, believing in the possibility of us. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, cattle lowing in the distance, the wind rustling through the cottonwoods, an owl calling from somewhere in the darkness. I got a letter from Porter's clerk today, Wyatt said finally. Thomas Hawkins. He is getting married next month. Asked if I would stand up with him. Are you going to? I think so. He is a good man. He was just doing his job that day. Wyatt paused. He also mentioned that Porter's marriage is not going well. Apparently Sarah is unhappy living in Redemption. She wants to move back east. Porter is miserable trying to keep her satisfied. Clara felt a flicker of pity. I hope they find a way to make it work. More generous than I would be. I can afford to be generous. I got everything I wanted. Why would I begrudge him anything? She smiled. Besides, his loss was very much my gain. Wyatt laughed. True enough. Clara thought about Benjamin Porter, stuck in a marriage of convenience, always wondering what if. And she thought about her own life, built on honesty and partnership and genuine love. She had won. Not because Porter had lost, but because she had chosen wisely. Come on, she said, taking Wyatt's hand. Let us go to bed. Tomorrow is a work day, and Eli will be up at dawn. As they walked into the house together, Clara paused to look back one last time at the ranch spreading out in the moonlight. The broken arrow. Her home. Her legacy. Her choice. She thought about the woman who had stepped off that stagecoach 2 years ago. Heartbroken, humiliated, with only $3 and a fierce determination not to be broken. That woman had been stronger than she knew, braver than she believed, capable of more than she imagined. And that woman had become Clara Hale, rancher's wife, mother, partner, architect of her own extraordinary life. The worst day had indeed led to the best life, not because of fate or luck or divine intervention, but because Clara had made a choice, had chosen courage over fear, possibility over certainty, hope over despair. And in the end, that choice had made all the difference. The Broken Arrow Ranch, spring 1879. Clara stood on the porch of her home, watching her 3 children play in the yard. Eli, now 5, was teaching his younger brother Samuel how to rope fence posts. Little Anna, barely 2, toddled after them with determined steps. The ranch had grown considerably in the past 5 years. They now ran 300 head of cattle, had built a new barn, employed 4 ranch hands year-round. But more than the physical growth, the ranch had become a true home, a place where love and laughter filled every corner. Wyatt came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. What are you thinking about? The journey, Clara said. How far we have come. Any regrets? Clara thought about that, about the challenges they had faced, the hard winters and difficult births, the cattle they had lost to disease, the lean years when money was tight. But she also thought about the cheese. 3 healthy children, a partnership that grew stronger every year, a community that had embraced her, a life built on honesty and hard work and genuine love. Not a single one, she said. You? Only that I did not find you sooner. Clara laughed and turned in his arms. We found each other exactly when we were supposed to. Not a moment too soon or too late. She looked out at the ranch, at the children, at the life they had built together from the wreckage of broken plans and dashed hopes. You know what I tell people who ask about our story, she said. What? I tell them that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing in disguise. That closed doors lead to open windows. That when one dream dies, it makes room for better dreams to grow. She reached up to cup his face. I tell them that I came to Texas to marry a stranger and found my soulmate instead. That I lost everything and gained the world. That is a good story, Wyatt said softly. It is a true story, Clara corrected. The truest story I know. And as the sun set over the broken arrow, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Clara Hale stood in the arms of the man she loved, surrounded by the family they had created, living the life she had chosen. It was not the life she had planned. It was infinitely better, because sometimes the best love stories are not the ones that follow the rules. They are the ones where 2 people choose each other, day after day, building something real from courage and faith and the willingness to take a chance. Clara had taken that chance. and it had changed everything.